Alan, so thanks for coming on the podcast. I appreciate you putting some time aside for us to talk about all the things that you do. Um, who had connected us? I know we were talking about that last time.
Tara Bradford.
Oh, right, because she's your publicist and she's involved with Aaron at the Upside, but I don't think you knew what that was, right? Tara's just your publicist?
Exactly. Shout out to Tara Bradford.
Yeah,
Thank you
she
for
sent me all your stuff too,
arranging
your
this.
bio, your headshot. She's pretty good. I mean, you sent it to me also, but I got doubles. But yeah, so let's go back to, kind of where you not necessarily grew up, but I mean, you can throw that in too, but your background and how you got into what you're doing, because obviously there was a journey there, and then we can get into all the
Sure.
things about leadership and stuff.
Sure. I was born in a log cabin in Staten Island,
Right.
around the time of the Pilgrims. No, I am from Staten Island. I am a native New Yorker. I live here in Manhattan and Miami, and I am in New York right now for this
You've
interview.
shaken your Staten Island accent, I noticed.
Just barely. If I spend 5 minutes with my parents, I
It would all come back, right?
It's bad. It's really bad. Went to college in Connecticut and spent 4 years trying to refine the not Staten Island accent.
Yeah, Connecticut helps, definitely.
It helps. I got the
Right.
lockjaw on the whole thing. So I really spent the better part of 20 years working in publicity, public relations, and marketing. I was a weird kid because when I always said when I grow up, I want to be a publicist, which is weird. But my father was a publicist, and
So you were familiar with it, yeah.
Yeah, he worked for network news and publicity. So I really wanted to
Right,
do
and
that.
publicist is really just getting people publicity, right, for what they do. Isn't that what it is, right?
Well, when I started out, it was really very, very focused on just getting people written up in the newspaper or getting them on the three television stations.
Yeah,
that
there wasn't like
existed.
all this stuff we have now, right? Social media platforms, and it's craziness.
And it was harder in a way because there was so much more competition to get on ABC,
Right.
NBC, CBS. So I started out working in television, just like my dad, being a publicist, and stayed in kind of entertainment publicity, and then moved into agency work, PR firms, and really the high point of my PR marketing career was working at Scholastic Publishing as the head of book publicity. And so I had the proud distinction of being the first person in the United States to work on the publicity for the Harry Potter books. And
I didn't realize that was Scholastic.
That was Scholastic. And that's where I really got the desire to build and develop teams, and was my pivot moment into human resources and coaching, and from there
That was around the Harry Potter project. That's how it happened.
That was really the moment where I realized that my strength as a leader is in developing others, and because I was able to really harness the talents of a very small team to accomplish something pretty significant. And which, by the way, little plug here, that's the topic of my TEDx, the magical power of shared purpose. I talk
Good.
about.
Okay. Well, we'll also put a link to that in the show notes so people can watch the TEDx, as I was going to mention that. Yeah.
So back then, companies were really great about letting you chart your own course. And so they said, well, where do you want to go next? And because I felt like I had kind of done the publicity thing. And,
right.
And I was
well, did the team thing come about because the project ended up being so big? Like it was such a big book series, really, right? It was probably bigger than anything you'd worked on, right?
Yeah, and I have to say, and some of my Scholastic friends are possibly listening in, and they'll recall too.
Let's hope.
The team. I'll make sure of it. The team was pretty dysfunctional. There was a good deal of toxicity in the organization, and because we were pulled together around something important, we were able to really transcend the pettiness and the crap that a lot of probably your listeners have to deal with in terms of running their own teams and business. And so I was able to then move into human resources within the company, and then I started running training and development for 1,000 people, which was hilarious because I had absolutely no experience in that at all.
Now that was for Scholastic to start. That was the first place you did it.
Scholastic, right?
And Scholastic's all children's books, right? Do they do anything for adults? Yeah.
No,
And
they
stuff too.
but the book division is a big money
That's the
driver.
magazine we used to get when we were little kids, right? And you'd take it home and say, Mom, I want to
Yeah,
order these 7 books. And they'd send you $1.50 and you'd take it into school. And then you'd,
yeah.
God,
Right. That was the book club, Scholastic book
right.
clubs, which my dad actually wrote for also. So another connection point
Oh, okay. There
to
you
my
go.
dad.
So I
Yeah.
remember that as a kid. You used to, oh, this is great. I mean, nowadays, I
Yeah.
don't know if the kids like, they're like, what do we need books for? You know, it's all becoming digital, but do they sell? They
Oh,
must through the
yeah.
catalog sell the digital version too, right? Yeah.
Yeah. They have, but they love getting those books. They love getting when the teacher opens that box and they get their books. So yeah,
Right. And they used to have the
there is
book day,
something
right? Where
happening.
they would put it in the gym and you'd
Yeah,
go and then they still do
yeah.
that in
They
the
still
elementary
do book
schools. Yeah.
fairs. Yeah,
Yeah.
Scholastic book
Book
fairs.
fairs, right. Yeah. That was fun.
So yeah, so I think that what I learned really from that experience is that when you that the leader of the team doesn't have to be the star of the show, and it's really about setting people up to be successful and getting out of their way,
I
and that
think
our
that is the
fundamental.
biggest, and it's one of the reasons why I've been successful in leading organizations and becoming presidents of whatever. Somehow you scratch your nose, you end up being the president of some of these groups. I think that is I've come to realize very early on that is exactly what a good leader does. You don't want to be in the spotlight. You want to empower people, make them feel about like, what do you need? If you're doing it to be in the spotlight, you're doing it for the wrong reasons, you know?
Right. Well, ego is a killer
Sure.
for a leader, and if you
Gets in the
think
way of
that,
everything.
yeah, there are those leaders who will, and I use that term loosely.
Right. They're not really leaders. That's the
They're
problem,
not
right?
really leaders. They hire people who are weaker than them because they're afraid of being shown up. They're
Right.
intimidated by
Insecurity.
talent.
Right.
They hire yes men
Right.
and
And the
all
whole
that.
thing breaks down. It doesn't become a successful organization.
Absolutely. My main focus was just helping people get the job done, and so that would mean sometimes that I would have to advocate for resources for them, or run interference with another division, or whatever. But ultimately, it's really about helping people do the best work that they can.
It's almost like being a parent, right? As a parent, we generally don't want, I mean, I guess there's other people don't feel this way, but most parents don't really want credit. It's a thankless job, right? You just want your child to
Yeah,
succeed. You want to help them behind the
yeah,
scenes. You want to make the phone call without them knowing that you smooth that over or whatever.
yeah.
Similar dynamic, right?
I think so. Right. It's about empowering. It's about empowering the team. So you're not there to just fix and solve. You're there to actually prove to people that they have the inner resources to get the job done, and you don't have to do it for them. You just have to be there to build their help build their confidence and set
Right.
them
I
up.
also find that doing that the right way, it lowers my level of stress. I don't have to do as much work as the president. The president
Right.
does the least amount of work. You could
Right.
be the president, be a great leader. Everybody's doing all the work and they're all feeling good about it. And
Right.
what do you need the
Right.
stress for?
Right. Well, know your zone of genius, right? So,
Right.
at that level, you should be really about setting the vision and strategic relationships, and scanning the environment for new opportunities and
Yeah. Making the
innovation.
big level decisions. I doubt Jeff Bezos is making lower level decisions at Amazon. He probably picks, let me
Yeah,
find 2 or 3 large decisions I can make on a daily or weekly basis. And that's his job, right?
exactly. They're not in the weeds of the day to day and the minutia. They're really they're elevating people to do those things.
Right. Okay. So take me back. You're at Scholastic, and I got you off track of your whole development
No,
story.
no, no. It's cool. So when I left Scholastic, it was my time, and for a brief stint, I went back into corporate communications because that's I don't know why. It was just hard. It was hard to start my business, and so I had an initial pivot, another pivot, and and then I went through coach certification, which was
Okay.
amazing, and decided that I was going to put out my shingle to be a coach, and I did that. I resigned from my job, and then the stock market crashed.
Perfect.
So
What year was
so
that? Because there's been a bunch of those.
12 years ago. I guess it was 12 years
Was
ago.
that when the
So
real estate market collapsed too, right? Yeah. Oh eight
yeah, it
maybe?
was. I think that's right. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, wait,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
totally.
That was the whole mortgage crisis too. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Right.
I was like, oops, I'm in business and I don't know where the business is going to be, but I'm scrappy, which is, which is what I try to instill in my
Right.
entrepreneur clients as
Bootstrapping.
well. Yeah. And then so I went out there, just told everybody what I was doing and what I was looking for, and kind of stepped right into an opportunity to coach these Wall Street guys who had lost their jobs and were trying to figure out who they wanted to be because they could no longer work in financial services. There were just no jobs. And
Right.
so I started doing career coaching.
Oh, so it wasn't just
coaching.
all leadership and team development. It was.
No, I just had to go where the need was, which was
Okay.
helping people get jobs, and
Right.
and it was successful in that. And then when the economy bounced back, I started to coach within public relations firms, helping those leaders and helping teams be more effective, communicate better with each other, deal with some
Right.
team dysfunction, and that was great for many years. Because I know that business inside and out. I was able to really understand their pain points,
Right.
but not get into the problem with them, but help elevate them so they could be more successful solving their own problems. And then I've expanded since, over working with companies like NBC and Simon and Schuster and pretty much you name it, Bloomberg, MetLife, Amex, as well as small companies and solopreneurs,
Right.
which I love, and so it's been a great ride. It's like all the experiences that I've had along the way, I feel have really set me up to be a successful business owner. I know how to market. I know how to communicate.
Sure.
I'm scrappy. I know how to pull resources out of thin air, and
Resourceful, I think they'd call that.
Yeah, scrappy,
Resilient.
resourceful,
Doesn't have to be scrappy.
resilient, networker.
Right.
And so for me, it's really about the power of connection, which is the two books that I wrote were both about related to that topic. And,
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and I think we talked about this last time when we were off the mic. Because if you look at the development of your career, or really anybody's career, a lot of it happens with, necessity. So you're developing your career while you're developing other people. You're learning from them, they're learning from you, and you
absolutely.
take on what, just as the law, right? So I start out as a business owner with my small law practice. I take on whatever I can take on, because I got to pay the bills, and you got to, and it may not be exactly what I do now and specialize, but now you kind of work your way into that area of specialty based on your background and your interest and your feelings and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and also, and I think especially now in this environment, like we need to be especially responsive and nimble and in addressing what the needs are of our clients, our prospects, of our communities, and then looking at how we can serve those needs while still aligning with what our big vision is and what our strengths are. And because I think that, for months now, I've been helping train teams to have virtual meetings, how to communicate better in those different venues, and helping leaders manage uncertainty and change, and how to deal with a lot of the stress and anxiety that comes from this crazy time that we're in. And those weren't necessarily my focal area 6 months ago, but
of course
it's what
not. The world changed.
The world changed, and you got to change with it.
You got to pivot,
so,
right?
Yeah. And so I think if we're learning anything right now from COVID and all that's going on in the world, is that we have to listen better to what people are asking for. And it's not about what we want to sell. It's about what people are asking to buy.
I think that's a very good point.
What the need is. It's like, I got a million programs I would love to put out there, but it's not the right time, and it's not the right. Sometimes I see it a lot with entrepreneurs out there. They're like they're messaging. They're kind of tone deaf. It's like the world is changing right now, but they're still trying to sell widgets and an old way of thinking and doing.
I think that's a good point. I think you got to do business with people now the way they want you to do business with them. They may not want to come to your establishment and wear a mask or even go inside, you know?
A big one. It's a
And same
big
with your
one.
services, you know, the services may not be resonating with what they need. And I think you're right. A
Yeah.
lot of business owners, because you know what, in the past, the old way of doing business was and listening, you don't listen to the customer, you offer your goods for sale and then the customer comes and they buy what you have.
Right.
That's changed
Yeah.
because people have choice and people have flexibility and people are worried and I don't know, all those types of things, right?
Yeah. Well, the one thing that's been kind of extraordinary for me is that emotional intelligence, the application of it, the assessments, and all the tools that I've used in the past, they're so needed right now, and
Sure.
because the emotional content, the emotional realities of what organizations are dealing with has never been so prevalent.
Yeah.
That so I'm able to go in and help people deal with all of the ambiguity and help them make decisions through not and be less reactive to what's going on, help them really think through things, and so I'm grateful that I have that tool chest to be able to really serve people in a meaningful way right now.
What do you see a common theme with with what's going on with the teams you're working with and the problems they're facing, difficulties?
Yeah, well, first of all, there just the work from home uh, reality, and there's some people who thought they wanted that. That's what
Right.
they've been asking their
And they're
bosses
like,
for
maybe
years.
part-time, not full-time.
Maybe
Right.
should we do it one day a week when I want to?
Right.
So some of the social connection they're missing, and that's creating a level of stress. Then there are people who like a lot more structure, and so they're struggling with not having the structure. So trying to help them have put more structure
Right. There's a lot of
into their
self-development,
life.
self-motivation, self-obedience is probably a good word, right? People are
Yeah,
not
yeah,
good
and
at
then
that.
people aren't good at that, and then also helping leaders find a greater capacity for empathy to understand what their employees are dealing with. They're now homeschooling, or they've got a
Right.
spouse that's over their shoulder. They got plates in the sink, and they're having to deal with
Right.
like a million different things. So helping them juggle, helping those employers understand the pain points of their employees. But then all of that, then there's still the job that needs to get done. So
Right.
so helping them balance the the vision setting, the keeping things on track while still demonstrating significant amount of empathy amidst all of this confusion. That's the struggle. That's
Yeah.
across the board. And also that just I've had to help a ton of my clients deal with the decisions around whether to furlough or fire, or
Yeah.
put people on contract versus or salary cuts, or benefits reduction, and it's very, very painful for a lot of my clients, those issues. But I hold their hand and help them make the best decision for their companies, and to do it in a way that's respectful of the employer, the employee, as well as themselves.
It's
Those are
weird
the
in the old environment, like the employees were kind of isolated. So your upper management, whatever, they see you as a worker, right? You come to work and this is your person. Now your boss or you into your boss's life, there's a window into who the real person is. So maybe
right.
to a certain extent, it makes empathy a little bit easier. But you still got to keep your eye on the ball. Hey, we got a job to do, but you also understand that, hey, oh, wow, you do have a couple of kids screaming in the
Right.
background. Just the
Right.
reality of life, right?
Exactly. So leaders have to first they have to do the work on themselves in during these times. Help manage their stress, manage their mindset,
Right.
sort through a lot of those issues that are coming up for them. We're all in this
Right.
together.
They're facing the
Regard,
same thing. We're all people. We have
yeah,
families, and I don't care who you are
yeah,
and how wealthy you are, right? It doesn't
yeah.
matter what
I
might
mean, the
be going on.
CEO might be bouncing between three homes,
Maybe, right. But look,
versus
I
what the
talked to a
employee is
guy
dealing with.
there's a guy coming on my podcast actually tomorrow he's a CEO of a company. They got 25 different divisions, and he's an entrepreneur originally, but eventually moved up in the company. Well, so our first call was from, I don't know, some house in Mexico they have, or Southern United States or whatever. They were on vacation. They're away but you know, he's an executive and all this stuff, but his kids still walked in the background and interrupted us and said,
Right.
Daddy, can you help me with this? And, you know, because people are people. It doesn't go
I
away.
love it. I love watching news channels where
From
like the
home.
anchor's on and
Right.
the kid like walks by in his
Right.
diapers, and it's
Yeah.
great. You know, it's like, I mean, I do think that this as terrible as all the everything is that we're going through right now, I do think that there's a leveling, there's a kind of a leveling.
Yeah, humanness aspect that got brought back in, that people stop forgetting that their news reporters are really people and have the same kind of problems and issues that we have in dealing with
I
our
think
lives.
it sucks, and it's all very humbling at the same time. So.
It is. But we've connected. I mean, the connections that probably would have never met. And
Right.
I've met people all around the world that have been on the podcast or have talked to me. I met in networking groups. I would never have met them if it wasn't for this move to online virtual meetings and networking.
I can now make my 7 a.m. business networking meeting on time because I can do it in my pajamas from the waist down.
The funny thing is, so I have an office in the house, but it's basically up on the third floor, and it's in a walk-in closet. I guess it's a room, but we've converted it to closet, so there's no air in there unless the door's open. So it is very hot up there. So I had an 8:30 meeting this morning, and I have an 8 o'clock on Friday. I can't do it at my house, so I have to get up, have to get dressed, wash up, hit the road, pack a lunch, because I'm not going to the cafe in the building and buying food. Forget that. So I got to do that and get out of the house. And I am like, it's only like 7 minutes, but I have to commute. Unlike you, I can't do it until the fall when my son goes back to college and it cools down. Can't use the home office. So it is what it is. That's a look into my life and what I got to deal with. I'm not in my underwear right now. I am in actual pants. You know, so it's very funny.
Yeah. Well, my spouse, works from home a lot too. So we're just like bumping into each other all the time. It's hilarious. Because I've worked from home for the past decade, and
so you probably have the real home office, and you're like, "What are you? This is my office.
Like, what are you doing in my space? This is my office. Get out of here!"
Right? Yeah. I know people that are like, I'm like, "Where's your office?" Well, it's set up in the living room because my spouse has an office, and that's her office. She's working from home. She's always worked from home. This is makeshift for me. And you see people walk behind and cats walk in front of the video.
Right. I've got so we were talking about the dog. So I have a dog who's just a really, really bad barker. And so when at the peak of COVID here in New York, the daycare, he had to stay here. I couldn't put him in daycare.
Right. Of course. Yeah.
So you'd be doing like a podcast interview, so like that dog is like barking as you know what of it. So I found the only quiet place in my apartment when that happens is the closet inside of the second bedroom. So I'm thinking like, here I am, like, talking to these important podcast hosts.
Right.
Like,
in a closet.
In a closet, looking at like the laundry tags. And it's like, this is humbling.
Absolutely. I have a guy on my podcast who's out in Texas. He's also not a coach. He's a motivational guy. He's got a community of whatever. Nice guy. And we're doing this podcast, and he has a mic like mine, but it like hangs. I mean, it looks like a studio. So I said to him, where are you? And he said, well, I'm in a barn. And I said, what? Oh, you have a studio like on your property? No. I'm near my sister's house, but we don't get any service like where we are. So down the road is this barn. It's this crappy thing. So we put up sheets. He's in like an outhouse, basically.
It's awesome.
So, it's pretty funny. But, that's what my background. You can see my background. It's virtual, so you can't see my office in terms of where I am. But okay, good. So let's keep going with the stuff we were talking about. It's fun to get off topic, but
I do all the time.
Yeah. So what kind of companies have you worked with? You were mentioning, like, if somebody brings you into NBC or to IBM or to, I'm making this up, Coca-Cola, whatever.
Yeah.
Generally, what are you doing? You're working with C-suite teams or?
Yeah, well, both, right? So often I'm working with an SVP and up to help them with their leadership skills. Usually they've gotten some feedback that they're high performing, but there's this blind spot, this thing that they need support around, and it could be in terms of decision making or strategic thinking or delegation or empathy. Right. A lot of times it's broad. It's like there's just a lack of emotional awareness, some struggle with reading the room or executive presence. So I'll be brought in to work with that that senior level executive for, usually about 6 months. And sometimes I'm brought in to help that executive with his team. So help facilitate team meetings, help him address some of the ineffective behaviors of a team, some of the conflict, the backbiting, the lack of role clarity or lack of accountability. So that's and I've worked a lot with companies, big companies like those that you've mentioned, and also nonprofits.
Okay.
Will often call me in to help them with that. So they're passionate people, but they don't always they're not as mindful of some of the people issues. And so
Right. Well,
I
not
help.
non-for-profits is a little bit different dynamic, right? Because you have paid professionals, you have professional staff, and then you also have a lay board that generally volunteers, and they're like, you don't pay me to
Exactly.
do this, so you get that kind of stuff.
Exactly, and often that leader, and I've had this happen several times with companies or with nonprofits that I've worked with. The leader is focusing all of their energy on donor relationships, and not really attending to the leadership issues within the organization. And so the people who work for that leader feel like they're the poor stepchildren, and that the leader only cares about the people who are writing the checks, and that needs to be balanced out, and help that leader understand how they're being perceived and how it's not empowering the employees or helping
Right,
the
right.
organization.
I wanted to ask you from a business standpoint. So I could see if you're an entrepreneur, right, and you have an organization, you have
Mm-hmm.
a bunch of employees, whatever, and you're having trouble, and maybe you talk to a friend and they say, hey, I'm stuck here. People aren't listening to me, whatever. They reach out to somebody like you because they get referred to you. But in a larger organization, is it the executive that says, hey, I'm having all these issues, or do they even see that? Or is it on an upper level review?
Right.
Or, I mean,
Sure.
how are
Sure.
you brought in? What's the
So
protocol? Yeah.
yeah. So all of those things. So first of all, there's some companies who just have a coaching culture in place,
Right.
and
Big
so
companies,
coaching is
it's
and
expected. They hire you, you're on contract. Okay, it's
right.
time. Go see Alan.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
and it's not necessarily because there's a problem. It's because that person is a high performer, and in order to get to that next level, they need some, uh, and they're set up
Perspective.
yeah, they need
Yeah.
that outside perspective. They need some feedback. They need some skill development in certain areas that they've never had to stretch in before. So that's one area. Rarely is it that executive
Reaching
knows
out.
that
Yeah.
yeah, or that they would go to their well, no, that's not true. I'm going to qualify that.
Sometimes it happens that way.
Yeah, sometimes an executive may go to their boss and say, hey, I'm struggling with this or whatever. Can I hire a coach, or will you hire a coach for me?
Yeah.
That happens. That happens sometimes as well.
I was a good analogy. I was on a call this morning with a transformational coach who was giving a presentation in a group I'm with every Wednesday mornings. And she made the analogy that you can't read a label from inside the jar.
Exactly.
And that's often the case. Not always, but often the case.
Well, you can't, or you can't. You can only see what your filter lets you see.
Correct.
And just like when you're driving, there's a blind spot,
Yeah.
and so you don't generally uh, a leader, an executive might know that there's something that's not working. Right, a lot of times they'll be questioning, well, so why are people leaving so often?
Right.
Why aren't I, right?
Right.
But they don't. The best they can
They
do
see
is
the
kind of
symptoms, but they don't know the diagnosis. Yeah.
yeah. So my job usually is the first part of any engagement is to just get them massive amounts of feedback through interviews, stakeholder interviews, through assessment tools, and then help them look through all of that and distill it. And my question is always like, well, what if like you may have a visceral reaction to a lot of this feedback, and that's
So
understandable.
you're
But
interviewing the
what if
whole
like,
team for the feedback, basically. Okay.
yeah, and so what if 2% of this was true? Like if you knew that 2% of this was true, how what would you do to adjust it or address it, or would you? Well,
Right.
a lot of times it's like I don't really, I don't care, and if they don't care or they don't
Then
see it, then I
you're
can't.
wasting your time.
Yeah, but usually, especially when they understand that like certain just like little tweaks could have a great impact, then they're open to it. And but nobody changes unless they see what's in it for them. So that's that's bottom
Yeah,
line.
and they got to have a little bit of a willingness and an
Yeah,
open-mindedness to say, okay, I'm
yeah,
not perfect. I mean,
yeah,
that's an ego thing, I guess, and a security thing, right?
yeah.
And I
Some
think
people
a
are
lot
just
of what'd you
go
say?
ahead.
No,
Well, it's
I
just
was
some people are just
yeah,
uncoachable in the moment.
right.
You
They
know,
need to hit bottom like a drug addict to say,
exactly,
I need help. And it doesn't
exactly.
have to be that drastic. But I think
Right.
it's funny, and I don't remember if I mentioned this to you last time, but I obviously have dealt with and interviewed and talked to all kinds of people. And even as a lawyer, when I counsel people, there is it is the common theme, the common thread is consciousness and self-awareness. Like that's 90% of the thing. Like if you're not aware of what you're doing and you make them aware, unless they're complete asshole and they're not open-minded at all, they're a long way to fixing the problem just knowing that it exists, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So consciousness is always the first, awareness is always the first step. And but I'm very fortunate at this point in my career that I seem to attract people who are very interested in examining their own belief system, at looking at open to looking at things differently, who want or wanting to really stretch themselves
Right.
and they've achieved a certain level of success, and they recognize that there's even a higher level for them, and
Right.
they're willing to, especially because first few sessions we're just developing trust, so they know that they can say
Open up to
anything
you,
to me,
whatever.
and then once they feel safe and that they can trust me, then they know that I'm not gonna suggest anything to them that I feel wouldn't be in their best interest.
Right.
And
Of
so they're
course.
willing to, but I don't mind when they push back either, because then that might just mean that I'm not meeting them where they are, and
Right.
you
No,
know,
but I mean,
resistance.
there's a development in every business career, right? Even as an entrepreneur, where you want to get to the point where you're working with your ideal client, right? The one that's most open to what you have to offer, and
Yeah,
and willing to be accepting of what you have to give. I think it's
yeah,
true in your, especially in your business, when you talk about the kind of high level coaching that you do, is that probably the most of the people coming to you are not really the people that need the help, like really at the bottom of the rungs of the ladder. These are people that are high achievers and they want to get to even higher level than they're
right,
at. Not always the
right.
case, but often.
Right, awesome. And there's another group of people that I do a lot of work with right now, and you probably have many in your audience. But I coach men, specifically coaches, to
Okay.
bring more emotional intelligence into their work as a means to have greater success and to help them with the tools to use emotional intelligence in their businesses. So what I love about that, because I'm all about
It's
impact,
the
is that
analogy of therapists that usually have their own therapy. They
exactly,
go to
exactly.
therapists with each other. Yeah.
Yeah, but for me, it's all about impact, and
Hmm.
so if I can like help these coaches uh, be better leaders within their own organizations and bring more people up, then I'm impacting a huge population.
Right.
So I do a lot of work with that group of men in particular, around emotional intelligence and helping them use their uh, raise their emotional intelligence in order to have more success in their own businesses, which has been
So
something.
do you have a training curriculum where you train people to kind of coach the way you coach, or is it just really one-on-one
It's
individualized?
a So I always have a group going at any point. I have a group called the EQ Advantage, which is actually, if guys are listening and want to, and on Facebook they can
Okay.
check out the EQ Advantage Facebook group.
Okay.
And so from there, I usually have a group of 10 men, coaches or consultants, men only, who I take through a group program, and they identify a project, something that they want to accomplish in 3 months, whether it's launching their own group program or booking a TED talk or starting a movement or whatever it is, and I train them and develop them with the EQ tools and give them accountability and help them coach through breakthroughs, and then they'll learn how to use EQ, uh, because I'm modeling it. And if they want to know more, if they want to get more tools to use with their clients, I can support them in that. But it's mainly to help them really have success in projects that they want to put out into the world that will have great impact for them and their businesses. So it's been a great success.
Good. So a lot of my listeners are small business owners, right? They're entrepreneurs. They're not really, I mean, they may be entrepreneurs of large organizations, but more often than not, they're small. So what kind of advice do you have when it comes to, developing yourself as a leader and running your organization? Now you're getting employees, and then, you don't have an assistant anymore. Now you got 10 employees. I find that one of the problems businesses run into, besides the fact they don't have a business plan, write a business plan, is that the organization ends up siloing itself. Like, right, HR starts working separately from finance, starts working separately from legal, it starts working separately from technology. They're putting systems in. They're not paying attention to how those systems support people properly. So I was wondering what kind of advice you have for people that are at that level.
There's sort of different approaches for different sizes, but I think certainly, like in the work that I do with teams, even if it's just a small team, a small business, there's a mindset, there's a paradigm shift that has to happen, which is really focused on the business as the entity, and everybody on that team is supporting the entity. So it's not about what I need. It's always about what the business needs.
Right.
And so that means that if the salesperson is struggling, it's about how can we all on this team help that salesperson be successful.
Salesperson meaning not the owner of the business.
Right. It's if the marketing person is messing up, right? The marketing person needs support. The marketing person doesn't need to be thrown under the bus.
Right, because it's affecting everyone. They all need to support each other.
How can everyone pull together behind marketing to give marketing what it needs in service of the business? So it's really changing the mindset about me against you. It's really about us pulling together in service of the organization. So the leader has to also call that out in teams, right? Jane, it's not about like it's not about how you're feeling, unappreciated, right? It's like how does this entity want to appreciate each other?
Right.
Like how do we show appreciation for each other as a collective? So we're never getting into the weeds about one person's sort of, issues.
Right.
It's really always elevating the conversation about what is the, how do we as a system want to respect people?
Right.
How do we? So it's always like sort of lifting people. So that's philosophy of business coaching. But so I think when we talked about this a little bit, so I coach a lot of very small businesses. 5 people,
right,
3 people, 2 people. Generally speaking, the leader or the business owner will come to me because he or she has a problem with this team member or that team member, or that person's not doing their job, or that, and it is almost always a reflection of some inner working that leader hasn't done on him or herself. It always has to start with reflection about how they're showing up, how the way in which they're showing up is impacting the way that the team is doing their job. And so it's always an inside job first and foremost. And a business owner who is not willing to really look at their own, take responsibility for their part in the team dysfunction or the breakdowns is always going to be hitting a wall.
Right.
Always.
Yeah, because ultimately, if you're the leader and there's a breakdown, you got to take it's got to be for you to solve and fix and admit that it's is there a lot of problems with like-mindedness? Like if you're a small organization, you got 5 or 10 employees, and you go through working with you, you may discover that half your employees are not like-minded in terms of what your vision is of the company or whatever, right?
Absolutely. Well, a couple of so I thought you were talking about groupthink, which is pretty common in teams that work together a lot. So in those situations, I'll often ask people. There's all sorts of interactive exercises and things we do where it's like, we assign people roles in a situation, like you be the naysayer, right? Like I want you to like shoot down like everything that comes through here. I want you to be the collaborator. It's like looking at how you can create a win-win. I want you to be the one that loves everybody's idea, like whatever and just to get people to practice stepping out of their own fixed way of being. But I'm not sure if that was the question that you were asking.
I was just wondering, because I know that's a problem, and it was a problem with my old law firm, is that I feel that I didn't, and it's on me, that I didn't pay enough attention to the vision, and and obviously the attorneys are all kind of at the same level. Were they like-minded in terms of the vision I had to build a firm, and I don't think they were.
Right, and you're, in some ways you're touching a little bit on my TED Talk, that topic, but the everybody comes in with their own set of values and their own sense of purpose. And what we need to do is, first of all, in the interviewing process, you really want to work on getting that right by asking kinds of questions that are going to
vet that out, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where
exactly.
I
If a person doesn't love serving humanity, and your company is about that, they're not a good fit, and it's going to be very hard to develop that in them. But so I think that sense of shared purpose is important from the get-go. But then it's also constantly bringing the conversation back to what that purpose is, letting people talk about how they're using their own personal set of values and their own gifts in service of that purpose, creating a culture of shared storytelling about what certainly looking at like customer success and baking that into every team meeting. It's like, let's hear stories from the field, stories of exceptional, inspiring
empowerment, positive energy, on the same page type of stuff.
Yeah, and that's like the first thing that goes out the window when it gets hard, but that's also the first thing that you need to bring back when people are losing their way.
Yeah, well, definitely energy within a group is important. If it's negative, it's going to drag them down. If it's positive, it's going to lift up the stragglers.
That guy who's sitting at the conference table with his arms crossed against his chest, rocking back and forth in the seat is leading energy in the same way.
Right? Yeah.
People are thinking that that's acceptable, and they're rocking back in their seats too. But so that leader has to really work on reading the room, looking at like following the energy of the room, and working to really lift the energy up and call that out. Energy is palpable.
You'd like attracts like, right? If you'll end up attracting all negative people if you're a negative person,
Yeah, absolutely. There's catabolic energy and anabolic energy, and you gotta good leaders also have to be energy shifters. They have to work on shifting their own energy, and they have to and in that process also need to work on shifting the energy of their employees. And that's the work. That is really the work. I talked about emotional intelligence. Emotionally intelligent leaders, it's been demonstrated, are more successful even than brilliant minds, than great intellects, and people with incredible business set of business skills.
Right.
Yeah. It's really about our ability to connect. It's about human relationships. It's about empathy. It's about vulnerability. It's about building trust. It's about relationship building. Those are the core essentials for a leader to be successful in these times.
Yeah, I think that, and I appreciate you spending the time with me talking about it, because I think that during these times where there's so much change and it's so different than people were used of, I mean, we didn't like change the direction of the train. We're on a different track now. So a lot of people aren't happy with that. So I think that's valuable. So how can people interact with you if they want to become, I mean, maybe they're not in the position to hire you as a coach directly, or they're not even the person at the organization that anybody's listening to, but how can they kind of interact with you in your world?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'd love to give all of your listeners a gift. So if you go to bit.ly/ASC leadership, you can download 5 tips to lead your business using emotional intelligence.
Okay, we'll put
And
that in the show
a great
notes.
infographic. And you can reach out to me at alan@alansamuelcohen.com. I'm happy to provide advice or a resource, or my website is alansamuelcohen.com.
Yeah, and Tara sent me all those links. We'll put them all in the show notes for people. But I appreciate coming on, spending almost 50 minutes with me this morning on a.
I could spend all day with you, Mitch.
I
Easy
appreciate
to
it.
talk to.
I appreciate it.